5 things that secretly terrify seniors, but they'll never say it out loud. There are things we learn to keep quiet as we get older, not because we have nothing to say, but because we've said it all before. Because we've learned, sometimes, the world stops listening when the voice starts to shake. So we hold it in. The fears, the doubts, the things that keep us up at night but never quite find their way into conversation. We smile politely when asked how we're doing. We say fine, even when we're far from it. We stay strong because that's what we were taught, to endure, to adapt, to keep going no matter what. And we do. We keep going. But some fears don't leave just because we've learned how to hide them. There's a difference between aging and being aged by fear. One happens naturally, the other slowly takes pieces of you without asking, and most people never notice it. They don't see the way your hands tighten when someone mentions the future. They don't hear the pause in your voice when they talk about retirement like it's a vacation. They don't feel the weight of silence when you think about who might not be there next year. But I want to talk about those things. The ones you don't say out loud, because behind every senior smile is a lifetime of stories. And a few quiet terrors that never made it to the surface. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough to carry them without letting anyone see. And that's exactly why we need to talk about them now. Not to dwell in fear, but to finally set it down, to name what's been growing quietly inside and give it some air, some honesty, some room to be understood. Because here's the truth. You're not the only one who feels this way. You're not strange for worrying about things no one ever prepared you for. And just because these fears are invisible doesn't mean they're small. They shape the way you think, the way you move, the way you breathe through the quietest parts of your day. So let's talk about them, not to scare ourselves, but to free ourselves. 5 fears, unspoken, often misunderstood, carried silently by people who've spent a lifetime carrying so much already. It's time to bring them into the light, not to make them louder, but to make them lighter. Because you deserve that. Because truth, even the hard kind, is the beginning of peace. There's an ache that settles in your chest when the house is too quiet for too long, when the holidays come and go and the phone doesn't ring, when birthdays are remembered late or not at all, when you hear stories about your grandkids from someone else and not from them, and even though you try to brush it off, something inside you quietly asks, am I fading from their lives? That's the fear we rarely admit out loud, the fear of being forgotten. Not just physically, though the silence of an empty room can echo deep, but emotionally, spiritually, intellectually. You start to wonder if your presence still matters, if your stories still hold weight, if your voice is still welcome in rooms you used to belong to. The world moves fast, and you feel like you're watching it from the edges, like a movie you're no longer part of. There's a difference between being alone and being forgotten. You can be alone and feel at peace. But being forgotten? That carries a loneliness of a different kind. It's not about solitude. It's about invisibility. About feeling like your life is slowly becoming a ghost even before you're gone. You remember when you were at the center of everything. When your home was full of noise, meals, laughter, mess. When people came to you for advice. When your opinion mattered. When your name lived at the top of someone's to-do list. Now you scroll through pictures on social media to catch glimpses of the lives you helped shape, and yet aren't invited into. And the hardest part? You tell yourself not to take it personally. You say, they're just busy, or it's how things are now. But that doesn't stop the question from whispering at night. If I disappeared, who would notice? This fear isn't born from neediness. It's born from love, from deep investment, from years of pouring yourself into others, of showing up, of being the one they always counted on. It's the fear that all that effort, all that love, is now sitting on a dusty shelf somewhere in someone else's memory. But let me tell you something. You are not forgotten. Maybe not everyone remembers to call. Maybe not everyone knows how to stay connected. Maybe some are too wrapped up in their own lives to realize what they're missing. But that doesn't erase who you are. Your value isn't based on how many people text you back. It's based on who you've been, day in and day out. The love you gave, the sacrifices you made, the quiet ways you made the world better for someone else even when no one saw it. And even if the world forgets for a moment, you don't have to forget yourself. You can still live a life that matters. You can still speak, still write, still create, still shine. You can still build new relationships, form new bonds, even in older age. You can still leave a mark, not for the sake of being remembered, but for the sake of being real. Because the truth is, the people who truly love you, they don't forget. They may get distracted, yes, they may be clumsy in showing it, but somewhere deep in their lives is your fingerprint, in the way they speak, in the way they love, in the strength they carry that once came from you. You are not invisible. You are not replaceable. And you are certainly not forgotten. The fear of being forgotten doesn't always shout. It doesn't knock on your door in the middle of the night or show up all at once. It comes softly, almost politely, in the little ways, in the empty mailbox when you used to get letters, in the silence after you send a message and it goes unanswered for days, in the family events that happen without you, the pictures you weren't in, the memories you didn't get to make. It hides in the casual, well-meaning phrases people say. We've just been busy. You're always in our thoughts. Let's plan something soon. And you smile, you nod, you say, of course, I understand. Because what else can you say without sounding like you're begging for something that should come naturally? And still you wonder. You wonder if your absence from their daily lives means you've become optional. Not out of spite, not from malice, just gradually less visible. You wonder if the things you once taught them still live inside them, or if they've been covered over by new ideas, new people, new lives. And when they tell stories about their past, you wonder if your name ever comes up, if your role in their becoming is still acknowledged, or if it's been edited out of the narrative. This fear isn't vanity. It's about legacy, about the deep desire to matter, not in a historical way, but in a personal one, to be known, remembered, to still exist in the minds and hearts of the people you loved most, especially when you're no longer there to remind them. There's something profoundly human in that longing. And yet, many older adults feel ashamed to admit it. We're told to be strong, to be proud of our independence, to not need reassurance. But truthfully, even the strongest hearts need to be seen. Even the most independent souls want to feel significant. And it's not just about family, it's about the world. About the cashier who calls you hon without making eye contact. About the doctor who talks to your adult child instead of to you. About walking into a room and feeling like no one notices. Or worse, like no one expects you to contribute anything anymore. That's how people begin to vanish, one assumption at a time. But here's the defiant truth. You don't stop mattering just because someone else forgets to remind you that you do. You don't stop existing just because the world moves faster than it used to. In fact, your value deepens. Because now, everything you've lived through, every joy, every heartbreak, every ordinary day, is wisdom. And whether they realize it or not, someone out there needs that wisdom. You are the story keeper, the foundation layer, the one who came before. And even if they forget to say it, even if they forget to show it, your influence runs through them, like a river, quiet, steady, essential. So if the fear of being forgotten ever creeps in again, meet it with this. You are not a fading memory. You are a living legacy. Speak when you feel moved. Write your stories down. Be bold about your place in this world, because people remember what they're invited to see. And maybe what they need most is a reminder of just how much you still have to give. Even in silence you echo. Even in stillness you shine. And in the heart of someone's life you are still there. There's a quiet panic that sets in when you realize your world is shrinking. It starts with small things. Misplacing your keys more often. Forgetting the name of someone you've known for years. needing help with tasks that used to be second nature. Maybe it's the first time you felt unsure on the stairs, or the moment your hands trembled just enough to spill the cup you meant to carry with ease, or the day the doctor mentioned that it might be time to stop driving. No one talks much about these moments. They pass quickly, no one gets hurt, life goes on. But inside, something shifts. You begin to question your ability to manage the things that once made you feel capable, confident, in charge. And that's when the fear creeps in. Not just of change, but of something far deeper, losing control. Control isn't about power. It's about dignity, about choosing how your days unfold, about making decisions, however small, that say, this is still my life. And when that begins to slip, it can feel like parts of your identity are being quietly erased. It's not just physical control. It's control over choices, over money, over privacy. You start to notice how people speak around you, rather than to you. They use phrases like, we've decided, or it's better for you. And suddenly, you're no longer the one steering the ship. You're the passenger, seatbelt fastened, politely expected to trust where others are going to take you. It's terrifying, not because you don't love them or trust them, but because you've lived a whole life building something, navigating storms, making mistakes, and owning them. To have that taken from you, even with good intentions, feels like being reduced, like becoming small in a world where you once stood tall. And yet the world keeps reminding you that control is slipping. Technology changes faster than you can keep up. Bureaucracy grows more confusing. Your body, once strong and reliable, now requires instructions, pills, appointments. You feel like your independence is being chipped away one piece at a time. But here's the truth that no one tells you enough. Losing control doesn't mean losing yourself. You are not defined by your ability to carry grocery bags or balance your checkbook without a calculator. You are defined by your presence, your wisdom, your being. Yes, there will be moments when help is needed, and yes, there will be decisions made that you might not fully understand or even agree with. But surrendering some control for the sake of safety does not mean surrendering your worth. And letting others support you doesn't mean your voice stops mattering. The key is to shift how you define control. Maybe it's no longer about doing everything alone, but about choosing where to allow help, about setting boundaries around your preferences, even if you can't do everything yourself anymore, about speaking up when you feel unheard, about finding ways to stay involved in your own story, even when you're no longer writing every line by hand. Control may look different now, but that doesn't mean you don't have any. You can still choose how you show up. You can still choose how you respond. You can still choose love, laughter, courage, and grace, even when the world feels uncertain beneath your feet. There is power in presence. There is dignity in adaptation. And there is a quiet kind of control that no decline can take away. Your ability to choose how you face each moment. So if you feel things slipping, breathe, speak, ask, advocate. Remember this. Your story didn't stop when your body changed, it just started turning a page. There are things you carry that no one sees, not because you're hiding them, but because you've simply grown used to the weight. As you get older, the past doesn't just visit now and then, it becomes a frequent guest. You find yourself remembering things in the middle of the night, or while doing the dishes, or during a walk when a certain smell in the air brings back a decade you thought you'd forgotten. And in those moments, you don't just remember what happened, you remember what didn't, the words you never said, the apology you waited too long to give, the risk you didn't take, the person you let slip away, the years you spent surviving instead of living. Regret doesn't always show up with fire and drama. Sometimes it arrives quietly, wrapped in phrases like, I wish I had, or if only I'd known. And the hardest part is, by the time many of these thoughts surface, it feels like too much time has passed to do anything about them. So you sit with it. You smile on the outside. You keep going. Because what else can you do? But deep down, there's a lingering fear, not just that you made mistakes, because everyone does, but that those mistakes will outlive the good. That the things you didn't say, the bridges you didn't build will define your memory more than the love you gave or the sacrifices you made. There's no pain quite like the ache of something unfinished. Maybe you wish you had been braver or softer. Maybe you spent too much time working and not enough time laughing. Maybe you hardened your heart to protect yourself and now wonder what tenderness you missed in the process. Maybe you thought you had more time, and now the moment you needed has passed. It's easy to assume regret is a sign of failure, but it's not. Regret is a sign of awareness, of love, of having lived fully enough to have choices that mattered. The danger isn't in having regrets. It's in letting them turn into silence. Because here's something true, even now. It's not too late to speak, not too late to forgive, not too late to reach out, not too late to write the letter, make the call, open the door to healing, even if no one else is walking through it yet. And even if the other person is gone, or the chance is gone, it's still not too late to tell yourself the truth. To finally say the thing you couldn't say then, to cry for what you lost, to acknowledge what hurt, to give yourself the same grace you'd offer anyone else. You are still allowed to make peace, even now, and sometimes doing that, whispering a truth into the quiet, naming what you never could before, is enough to start healing the part of you that's been stuck in yesterday. Because no life is without mistakes. No life is without detours. But you are still here, which means your story isn't finished yet. And maybe the next chapter isn't about what you did wrong. Maybe it's about how you finally forgave yourself, even if no one else ever knew what you carried. It's the fear no one wants to talk about. Not at the dinner table, not at church, not even in those quiet moments when we allow ourselves to be most honest. We'll talk about aches and pains, about wills and funerals, about medical decisions and hospital visits, but this is different. Because the fear of dying alone isn't just about the moment you take your last breath. It's about all the moments leading up to it. When you wonder if anyone will notice you're gone, if anyone will sit at your bedside, if anyone will remember your laugh, your voice, your favorite story, if the last chapter of your life will be written in solitude instead of love. This fear doesn't always wear a dramatic face. Sometimes it just looks like a quiet afternoon with no phone calls. Like days blending together, each one a little quieter than the last. Like watching other people's lives from a distance, children who've moved away, friends who've passed, routines that no longer include you. And it builds, slowly, in the silence. A whisper that asks, will I be remembered? Will I be held? Or will I fade away alone? It's not just about physical company. It's about witness. You want someone to know you were here, that you mattered, that you left fingerprints on the lives around you, that your stories live on in someone else's memory. But many older adults carry this fear quietly. They don't want to worry their children. They don't want to ask for company and seem needy. They don't want to admit how deeply they long for connection at a time when people assume you're content with solitude. And then there's the deeper layer. What if the people who should be there aren't? What if the ones you love the most are too busy, too far, or too emotionally distant to be present in your final days? What if the love you gave doesn't return to you when you need it most? That's the ache underneath it all. Not just the fear of physical death, but of being forgotten in the process, of slipping away quietly while the world keeps spinning unaware. But here's the beautiful, powerful truth. You don't have to die alone to feel seen. You don't even have to wait for your final days to reclaim your presence. You can build connection now. You can choose to open your door, your heart, your life, even a little. Not to everyone, not recklessly, but to those who show up, to the neighbor who says hi, to the friend who still checks in, to the stranger who offers kindness, to the community waiting for you to reach back. There are ways to be held spiritually, emotionally, relationally, that don't depend on who's sitting at your bedside at the very end. And even if the worst fear came true, even if you were alone at that moment, you still would not be forgotten. Because your life echoes through the children you raised, the kindness you offered, the meals you cooked, the advice you gave, the jokes you told, the prayers you whispered, through the choices you made when no one was watching. Death may be solitary in the physical sense, but the soul never travels alone when it has left love behind. So breathe, live, speak, connect. Make peace with today. You are here now, and you are not as alone as fear wants you to believe. Even in your quietest hour, your life still speaks, and someone somewhere is listening. We carry so much more than people realize. Behind the wrinkles, behind the laughter lines, behind the quiet strength that's so often mistaken for indifference, there is a storm of emotions that most will never see. Not because they don't care, but because we've been taught to hide it, to protect others from our fears, to keep walking, chin up, even when the weight inside us feels heavier by the year. But just because we don't say it out loud doesn't mean it's not there. The fear of being a burden, the fear of being forgotten, the fear of losing control, the fear of regret, the fear of dying alone. These are not signs of weakness. They're signs of being deeply alive, of having loved and lived and cared enough to still want meaning, right up to the very end. If you've felt any of these fears, you're not alone, not strange, not broken. You're simply human. You're part of a generation that endured more than most people will ever know, and still found a way to carry on. You survived loss, change, heartache, reinvention. You adapted to a world that often forgot to slow down and honor what you brought to it, and you're still here, still standing, still learning, still hoping, still loving, still mattering. There's no shame in naming your fears. There's freedom in it. There's healing. Because when we finally speak the things we've kept buried, we make room for something else to grow. Peace, connection, understanding, even joy. So let this be a reminder, not just to yourself, but to anyone who might listen. You are not a burden. You are not forgotten. You are not powerless. You are not defined by your past, and you are not going to vanish into the background of this world unnoticed. You still have things to say. You still have love to give. You still have light left to shine. And even if the world doesn't always know how to celebrate that, you must, because this season of life is not the ending. It's a refining, a revealing, a return to the truest parts of who you are. Speak your fears if you need to, then lift your chin. You've made it this far, and the road ahead, however long or short, still belongs to you.